This is 911. State your emergency. Hello? I can't help you if I don't know where you're at, honey. Where are you at? Where are you? I need as many units as I can get for Fairfield Road. Give me the numbers.
911, what's your emergency?
Hey friends, it's Fletch. I'm Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Welcome to this new podcast series, Off the Cuff, Confessions of an ENP. Brought to you by 911 Inform, delivering next-generation 911 services for the enterprise today and making every second count. In this series, we're going to be talking to ENPs that have been on the job for years, as well as those brand new ENPs that have just passed the test. We'll dig in and have an in-depth conversation and find out what the ENP certification means to them. We'll talk about why they did it, what it means for their career, and what they did to pass the exam. Industry certifications are important to industry professionals, and the ENP certification is one that's admired by many in public safety. So join me as we find out exactly what makes an ENP tick in this off-the-cuff podcast series, Confessions of an ENP. Hey, it's Fletch. Welcome to this episode of Off the Cuff, True Confessions of an ENP. Today, joining me all the way from San Diego, California, is Brian Jensen, ENP with San Diego Fire and Rescue. Thanks so much for joining me today again.
Great to be here, Fletch.
So, tell us a little bit about Brian Jensen. Who is he?
So I started at San Diego Fire and Rescue about 8 years ago. I just gotten out of the Army and was looking for something to do. And this job opportunity came up. So I started with the city of San Diego as a fire dispatcher. And it's been a great ride. I've really enjoyed it so far and plan on staying in it as a career at this point. I worked my way up from being a dispatcher to a supervisor and got into training, not only as a dispatcher, but as a supervisor as well. So I was the training coordinator just before, and now I'm the one of the two fire dispatch administrators for San Diego Fire and Rescue. So I've had quite a well-rounded experience at San Diego.
No, that's pretty cool. Now, California is probably one of the more advanced progressive states, especially with the fire departments. So you've got Cal Fire. What's the relationship between you and Cal Fire, which covers the whole state, and the different agencies?
So I'd say we work really well with Cal Fire. We have 4 different main zones in San Diego County. San Diego Fire is responsible for what's called the Metro Zone. So we are responsible for Chula Vista, National City, Imperial Beach, Coronado, Poway, and the city of San Diego. And we interact with CAL FIRE on a very regular basis, as a lot of the borders in San Diego County meet up with areas in CAL FIRE's jurisdiction. And CAL FIRE is also responsible for our aircraft ordering for like vegetation fires. And they're also our air ambulance coordinators. So we have a fair bit of contact with CAL FIRE. And I'd say, like I said, our relationship is very well.
No, that's great. Now, from a 911 perspective, are you a primary, secondary, or how does that work?
So the city of San Diego has a primary PSAP, which is the San Diego Police Department, and San Diego Fire Rescue is the secondary PSAP. So we're responsible for fire and EMS for the city of San Diego.
Okay, so everything coming into you is a transfer then?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, do you use the new functionality that's coming available, like the Rapid SOSs and so forth?
Absolutely. Rapid SOS has been one of the probably the greatest innovations, I think, in our space in the last 10 years. And it's pretty much completely revolutionized how we take calls. So in our center, we use Rapid SOS almost daily, if not hourly. And it's game changing to be able to know exactly where somebody's at. That age old thing about, Domino's knows where you're at. Well, finally now we do too, which is great. I think the other really impressive thing about Rapid SOS is Rapid SOS is available even on calls that don't have a phase 2 cell phone. So sometimes, we're getting information, that 5, 6, even just a few years ago, we might not have gotten from a phase one caller. It's also a great check for, we have a lot of wildland urban interface in San Diego and a lot of trails and stuff like that. So it's very useful for locating people, they're lost, and the maps have a lot more detail than our CAD maps. So it's great to be able to see trails and the markers and stuff on those trails. So it's a really useful tool, and I'm very happy that we've adopted it.
So I got to ask you, if you show up with a fire hose, can you still show up with a pizza? And do it in 30 minutes or less?
It's a good question. I don't know about that, but I'd say all in all, I think our location accuracy has gotten significantly better thanks to Rapid SOS. So that's a great product.
So I'm gonna take a little bit of a liberty here because, my product at my company, we're about collecting enterprise building facility data and then providing that in through the jurisdiction view in Rapid SOS and I think it's got many use cases across any type of call, but fire EMS calls specifically where you're going to need to know or building information is more useful. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be too much info flooding your dispatchers?
It's a good question, and I think that's a very reasonable point to want to explore. I don't think so, and the reason I say that is because we've started to kind of condition our dispatchers to accept lots of information. And as time goes on, the information is only going to get larger. So we've actually, we use kind of an in-house interface with Rapid SOS. And that allows us to see all that additional information in like a card. So we can kind of hide it at our discretion. If we don't want to see that information. But I think being able to see the height, like that somebody's at in a building or like a room number or, where the stairwells are at or things like that, I think that's all going to be really useful, not just for call takers, but for our dispatchers as well. They're actually working the incidents because somebody's going to have, kind of a bird's eye view of some of these buildings and what's near the building and where the exits are at and things like that. So as time goes on, I see our dispatchers being more involved in the incident rather than less.
Sure. They're really becoming the quarterbacks, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What prompted you to get your ENP in your career?
So when I got promoted to the administrator position, I realized that there was a vast amount of things that I had very little knowledge of, and just a really great lack of understanding of how the system actually worked. I've been a dispatcher for a while now, and I know how our side of things work, but I don't really, I didn't have a good understanding of how calls originated. I didn't have a good understanding of next gen or what any of this technology was going to look like in the future. So I figured being an ENP would be a good kind of jumping off point for understanding what the future is going to hold and understanding what, all of our contractors and vendors that come in and talk about, things like the phone system or the CPE or anything like that. I really didn't understand that, but now I have a much better understanding thanks to this exam.
I was talking to Leah Hornacek up in Michigan, and again, she had the same situation. They were just going through a technology refresh on the CAD and the radios and everything all at once. And the thing she said it helped her, she could go in and actually talk to the vendors and not only understand what they were talking about, but she could, give them her needs in their language.
Yeah. There's such a vast array of information. And when you're a dispatcher, you really don't focus on how the call gets to you or how the radio works. You just know that when you push the button, you talk and somebody can hear you, right? That's, at the end of the day, that's really what the dispatcher cares about. But when I talk to vendors and when I talk to other, people in the city that work for like the wireless division and stuff. It's very important for me to be able to know what they're talking about and kind of speak a common language. So I think that really goes a long way to kind of building that initial education.
I was talking to another ENP, and he told me one of the value points he learned was the difference between a central office and an end office. And the fact that an end office is a central office, but a central office is not an end office. And it's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference when you're trying to troubleshoot a problem. Right?
Yeah, there is it's very important to have that common knowledge of how the system works. And that's definitely, I've come away with so much more understanding of how things operate. Even if I couldn't explain every single piece of it, I at least know what people are talking about now. And I know kind of what I don't know actually too.
I'll tell you what, Brian, that's just as important. Know what you know and know what you don't know. Because if it's, in public safety, if you're trying to make a decision on something you don't know, the best thing to do is not make that decision and find somebody that does.
Yep.
Right, because you're dealing with life safety. So that's an important point. What was the most difficult part of the test for you?
I think probably for me, the hardest part was trying to put all of the acronyms and all of the terminology together. There's such a vast amount of terminology that it really was very overwhelming at the beginning, because a lot of things on the test and in the book are all based on acronyms. So if you don't understand what some of these things are right up front, it's very hard to put all the pieces together. So I think that was probably the hardest part for me.
It's almost like learning a new language.
It really is. And the only really good way I found was to just start memorizing terminology. I took Tracy Eldridge's study group, and that was one of the big things that she recommended, was just to study the terminology, make flashcards, and I found that to be very useful. The terminology is really, I think, what led to greater understanding as I kept studying and reading through the book. When I would come to terms, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's this. Oh, okay. Now I see how that all kind of fits together. So it's, I think that's really key.
So you took Tracy's class and you still passed the exam.
I know. Amazing, right?
Yeah, it is. And, and I have to trash her every single time because I love her to death, and she's like a virtual sister to me. And I know that it drives her absolutely freaking crazy when I do this in a public environment. And I also know that I'm going to get my ass kicked at a serious level. But no, it's funny because probably the last 5 or 6 interviews that I've done have all taken Tracy's class, and everybody just has rave reviews over her teaching capabilities, which...
Well, and not just her teaching, but I think the biggest thing too is she breaks things down in such a way that you really can understand the nuance of it a little bit more, because when you pour through the book, you can look at the picture, but you don't necessarily understand exactly what's going on. And a lot of the things, especially the next gen, her explanation of that was way more than I've ever heard anybody describe. And I've sat in several of these statewide meetings, and people are talking about how all the functions work and how the call is going to traverse the EZNet. I'm going, what is happening? But her explanation I thought was excellent. So it really helped me to kind of understand how that all works.
She does it the same way I do. I take something you already know, and then I correlate next generation into that. So people ask me all the time about E911 and Next Gen 911, and I tell them, think about black and white and color TV. You can buy a 60-inch flat screen high-def TV, but if you're watching Nickelodeon in a 1950s rerun of I Love Lucy, it's black and white. And it isn't until the whole process, all the way through, is color that you're going to see color. And people can say, oh, I understand that. So it's about breaking it down into simple things you already know, and you'll find out you already understand this stuff.
Yeah.
It just needs to be correlated.
Yep.
So I taught her everything she knows, but
I think she'd probably dispute that.
I think you might be right. I'm not. I'll probably hear about that too. So, what are some of your study tips for getting through the tough stuff? You mentioned flashcards. That's something that I've been hearing constantly, that people are using these online flashcards that are apparently out there for everything. And I was shocked to hear how much was available for a niche little topic like ENP.
Yeah, there are lots of pre-prepared that many other people have done in the Quizlet app that Tracy had recommended. And I found that I had to create my own because there were just so many definitions and such. It was just easier for me to do my own. But having the flashcards, I think, is a huge study tip. Looking at the videos from her study group several times, in some cases, really helped. I also was using the whiteboard behind me to kind of diagram, how the call, works its way through the process. That really helped to kind of solidify how things work. And I think the other thing too that I found was just reading through the study guides once or twice. I ended up reading it, I think, twice as I was studying, and then taking the practice exam that the association offers. That's probably the best thing you can do to prepare, is take the practice exam, because it really gives you a feel for how the test works. And if you've never taken one of those tests, it's a little different. So, it was kind of helpful to understand how the different buttons work and how the questions work, and to get kind of an understanding of what the questions were going to look like.
So what did you think of the, and this is my favorite part when we review the tests every year. I work really hard on the distractor answers personally, because I just really enjoy trying to, stump the trump, if you will. What did you think of some of the distractor answers? I'm dying to hear some feedback on these things.
Some of the questions were very straightforward, and I immediately knew which answer it was. Other ones I kind of had to stare at for a few minutes and really think about. But I didn't find the distractors to be severely, annoying or anything like that. Most of them made pretty good sense to me. But there were a few that were very close together, and I was like, oh, I think it's that one, but I'm not quite sure. So.
Well, that's the whole purpose. You got to read the question, and there might be one word in there or one or two words that absolutely make one of the answers more correct than all the others. But they're all, 80, 90% correct. And if you're not really careful, you could easily be misstrayed. But again, that's the whole purpose of testing your knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So, what was the impact on your job and your role, and from your management perspective, when you came back as an ENP? Did that change their perception of you at all?
That's an excellent question. I really don't know if it's changed anybody's perception, but I think in my own mind, it's solidified that this is the career for me, and this is what I want to do. Whether it be continuing to work in a dispatch center or moving into the private sector someday. 911 is definitely a passion at this point. I think it's proven to me that this is something I really want to do. I think it's also made my management aware that this is out there, and that there's more education that we can all get. Because I'm the only ENP in our center at this point, but it's definitely made other people, curious, and it's made people ask, "Oh, wow, how'd you get that? What'd you do? How'd you prepare?" So I think it's really important to kind of cultivate that a little bit more, so that we can get more people that have this kind of knowledge.
Do you see your agency making an ENP certification a requirement? Maybe not required to get hired, but must obtain and maintain, within a year or something like that.
I don't, and the reason I say that is because our agency is part of the department, and our director, so to speak, is a deputy fire chief. So I highly doubt that the department would mandate that certification for that person, or for any of the civilians that work here. But I think it's certainly a worthwhile certification for any communications center manager to have. I think it's, like I said, it's a really valuable, broad spectrum of knowledge. So I think it'd be certainly something to look into, but I don't see the city doing that.
Do you did you take your CMCP as well?
I have not, but my deputy chief has taken that course, and I would like to take that someday in the future.
Yeah, that would be, that's kind of whatever one you do first, it depends on where your career is and, what path you came into it. But I think both of those are very, very valuable. The CMCP, if you're going to expire into a center manager, again, is more focus on that skill set and how to become that type of person. Where do you see your career going for yourself? Where do you want to take your career?
I was talking about this with my wife the other day, and I honestly, I don't know yet. Some days I feel like I'm going to stay here at San Diego Fire and, maybe be the deputy chief someday. Other days, I think, maybe I'll look for a job at a private company, a few years down the road. It's really hard to say, but I certainly am not ruling out moving to the private sector in the future, a company like maybe Rapid SOS or Rapid Deploy or something like that, as a subject matter expert or something along those lines, maybe. Or I don't know.
Well, it's really important because, even our company and all the companies, they've got great R&D people. Those guys write and girls write code like crazy, but none of them have ever stepped inside of a 911 center, and they don't really understand why they're building what they're building.
Right.
So it's very important to have public safety SMEs in those companies as well to guide that and vet that and say, yeah, this is what I need, or no, this is totally off the wall. We don't do this. There's a lot of well-vetted people that have had a 20, 30-year career now moving into the private sector. And I tell you, there was not a big crowd in the private sector that had any public safety experience. I mean, I was a dispatcher, and on the road as a special officer in New Jersey back in 1980 to 1985. Things were a little different back then,
Just a little bit.
A little bit. I mean, we didn't even have 911. We didn't even have caller ID. My CAD was 6 feet by 4 foot and hung on the wall behind me. So, things are very, very different. But I still have a sense for what needs to be done. And more importantly, I speak your language. So I can talk to you and I can translate into the developer language.
Yep. Exactly.
I'm the United Nations translator. Hopefully I get it right. So, well, that's fantastic, Brian. Thanks so much for sitting down with us. And, just to let everybody know, this is our second session because somebody screwed up the recording the first time. It was Tracy Eldridge, I got to be honest.
Oh, snap.
No, I hit the wrong button. So this is our second time sitting down. Completely different, but just as interesting, by the way.
Absolutely.
Maybe, who knows, maybe one day that other one will show up in the lost episodes of Off the Cuff, True Confessions.
There you go.
Brian Jensen, San Diego Fire and Rescue, and one of our newest ENPs. Congratulations. Thanks for what you do. And best of luck and success on your career wherever you decide to bring it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been great to be here.
Okay. Have a great day. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Off the Cuff, Confessions of an ENP. I'm Mark Fletcher, ENP, and I'm the Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Off the Cuff is sponsored by 911 Inform, delivering next-generation 911 solutions to the enterprise today and making every second count. Visit them on the web at 911inform.com. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Fletch911. Check out all my blogs and podcasts at Fletch.tv. And be sure to like and subscribe below. That way you'll be immediately notified whenever a new podcast is published. Thanks so much for listening. If you're in public safety, thanks for what you do. Take care and have a great day.